Hey guys, my name's Hirsch. I work at the NAB, as we previously established. I'm going to be doing a talk about workmanager, which is one of my favorite APIs, which is a bit strange to say, really. Who has a favorite API? It's like having a pet rock, you know. I mean, some of my friends have Samsung phones, which is similar. So, my contact. So I'm on Twitter, LinkedIn, and I've got a website that I don't really update. So yeah, don't go there. Probably. I was going to tell myself I wasn't going to put any. Well, I was telling myself I wasn't going to put any GIFs in my presentation, so I put one in. This is from Infinity War, so it's not going to make sense to you if you haven't watched Infinity War. Every time I do a slide deck for an API, I put in a lot of existential questions, like, you know, what's the API doing? What is the API? Where does it go? Why do we need it? And it always reminds me of this particular clip because, you know, they're asking a lot of existential questions for someone they already know. So, there you go. There's a lot of bad grammar, but I had to retrofit this particular slide to that GIF because I put a lot of effort into the GIF. It took me about 1 hour to write the slide deck and 2 hours to actually do the GIF. So that's the level of commitment we're talking. So work manager, where is it? Where does it go in your app? You know, what conditions do you need to be able to use it? Who is it? What does it actually do? Why is it? Why do we need it? You know, what's driving us to be able to use it? Implementation details, because, you know, it's a technical talk, so I'm going to try and talk about a little bit of code. There's different types of work that can be done in the background. So one-time and periodic work, something that repeats, something that's once off. I was going to write a slide titled miscellaneous, but that didn't seem cool enough, so I wrote a slide called other cool stuff. And I've also got a demo, hopefully it will work, and the dreaded question slide. Alright, let's get started. So where is Work Manager? In your app's build.gradle. It's a Jetpack dependency, so obviously if you want to pull it in, yeah, you put it in your app's build.gradle. It's part of Jetpack, and it's already been ported to Android X, so that's kind of cool because, you know, if you're really nifty developers and you've actually migrated to Android X, it's super nifty to be able to use Work Manager. Where does it work? So it actually supports API level 14 plus. So there's a, you know, it actually has a lot of backwards compatibility, which is nifty. And it works with and without Play services. So if you're not shipping Play services, Firebase, it still works. There's a dependencies block to be able to pull it in. And I'll also put in the test implementation part. So if you want to test Work Manager, which you should be doing, you should be testing everything really, then you can use that. I've skipped a couple things, so you can actually override threading. You can, if you're using core routines or if you're using RX, you can actually override that behavior in your worker, but I can't skip that because I only really have about 10 minutes and also threading's hard. Yeah. So who is it? Well, it's an API that lets you do background stuff, specify constraints, and it's deferrable but guaranteed. So if you have some work that needs to be done, but it doesn't need to be done in your app's process, you can use Work Manager. So for example, some things like, I guess, analytics, you can actually bundle them into Work Manager tasks, and because they're usually not best effort, you need to send analytics, so you can actually make your app better, I'm assuming. But they're deferrable, you know, and they need to be guaranteed. So Work Manager comes to the rescue. It survives process death. So when you spin up your app, you know, there's a process that spins up with your app. When it goes to the background, for example, and when it gets killed, the process dies. But with Work Manager, you can actually queue work, and then the process can actually be spinned up, and yeah, it can do background work. So that's kind of cool. It supports chaining, and I forgot to write cancellation because I wasn't sure if I was going to run out of time. But yeah, it supports chaining, it supports cancellation. It's really cool. And we'll look at some code in a sec. Why is it? So why do we need work manager? Why can't we just use started services and bound services? Well, the Android team has been very conscious of, I guess, what background services run in Android phones for performance. So in Android M, they put in a bunch of battery optimizations, like doze mode, for example. They restricted implicit broadcast receivers in Android N because you should be explicit as far as like broadcast receivers is concerned, because you're spinning up your app's process every time you receive a broadcast. And also background app limits and app standby buckets. So as soon as you background your app, it actually goes into a, I guess, background process bucket, and it will eventually be killed off at that rule. So you can't really, because services run in the same process as your app, and you can't specify constraints, it's probably bad design, and that's why Work Manager comes into the picture. I stole this from the Google talk about Work Manager, but I've actually credited them, so all's good. So there's 4 quadrants. As far as any background work in your app's concerned, you can use, if your app's actually live, you can use the app's process, and you can use thread pools, regardless of whether it's best effort or if it needs to happen right away. So you can use RX, you can use coroutines, you can use executors, what have you really. So that's quadrant 3 and 4, obviously. If you want something that needs to happen right away, is not deferrable, then you can use a foreground service. Obviously you need to provide a notification and a notification channel so the user's aware. That happens in quadrant 1, and that guarantees execution. In quadrant 2, you've got job scheduler, job dispatcher, alarm manager, and broadcast receivers. So they've got different use cases. Some of them have limitations, like job scheduler is only available on API level 23 and above. So you can't really use it if you're targeting, if you're if you're still supporting a older version API. Job dispatcher is actually a part of Firebase. So if you're not shipping play services, you can't use it. And alarm manager and broadcast receivers is really old school. It needs a lot of configuration, and every time you reboot your phone, you have to reset your alarm managers. So Work Manager wraps around all of them and gives you a nice little API to be able to do a bunch of stuff. So what does it look like in code? Well, you can have a one-time work request which gets fired off once, obviously. You can pass serializable data. So in this particular case, this is actually from one of my apps, which we'll demo in a second. It's taking a string array and passing it to the worker, and we'll go to that code in a sec too. I'm setting a tag, I'm setting input data, so I'm passing it to my worker because my app's not going to be available when the worker is fired off. It's adding a tag because you need to be able to, I guess, tell what the worker is doing so you can cancel it. And there's a set ID method or an add ID method, which is a UUID. A tag's better because it's human readable, it's a string. So then all you need to do is enqueue your work request using the workmanager.get instance convenience method. Optionally, although I really recommend it, you can set constraints for your work. So if you are doing some background work that talks to a backend API, you need network connectivity, right? So you can set that constraint. You can set constraints about battery, battery not being low, so you're not really kind of giving the user a bad experience, that kind of stuff. Periodic work requests are things that can be fired off every so often. So I guess the builder for it is a little bit different. You set a period, which is in this case 24 hours, and then there's a kind of you specify about the actual period of time that your work request needs to run in, which is the second value. You add a tag, you add input data, and you go build, and then you can enqueue it. This is what the worker looks like. So in the 2 previous slides, I've specified in the builder a class which is the actual worker, right? And that's what this looks like. It's a single method class. It's called do work. All the work that happens in that particular method is in a background thread. So you can actually, I guess, specify stuff declaratively. You don't need to worry about listening for asynchronous stuff because it's all synchronous. So in this particular case, it's getting the input data that we pass in, and it's spinning up a couple of, I guess, convenience classes to be able to talk to the backend. This app actually, what it does is it takes your contacts and backs them to Dropbox. It's the first ever app I made. That's how I learned Android. So yeah, what you can then do is, yeah, actually iterate through your, I guess, whatever data it is, and make whatever background calls you want to. If it's successful, then you return result.success. If there's an exception or if there's a failure, then you return result.failure. And we'll go through that in a sec too. So we talked about tags. Tags are important, so you can actually cancel work. So the second method in there does cancel all work by tag, and you specify the tag to be able to cancel your work. To be able to have dependencies on your chained work, you can go get instance.begin with request number 1. Once that occurs, then you can go another work request, and then you can enqueue. So that's kind of cool too. And we talked about result.success and result.failure, but actually there's a result.retry. So if your work request fails, you can actually specify a way to be able to retry your work as well. So very convenient again. And that's my cool stuff slide. I've got a quick demo. Sorry, the app's not super pretty. It is literally the first app I ever made. So I had to kind of come up with a lot of imaginary names because it's an emulator. I do have real frames. So what we're going to do is, these are contacts on this particular emulator. They're stored, and they're stored in Dropbox, and we are going to delete them. So this actually uses RX because it's in your app's process. And once that's done, they're gone. So you actually get them in this particular list, so you can actually back them up to Dropbox again. So what we're going to do is go back up all, and that's going to use workmanager. Oh, my live demo is actually working. That's crazy. In debug mode, you actually get some logging. It's kind of unpredictable because it's deferrable, and you don't know when it's going to be kind of viable, but it takes about 10 seconds odd. It will come through. I have a video if it doesn't come through of it working. I'm looking at the wrong emulator. That's probably why. There you go. Worker result success. Yay. Yeah, so they're all gone. They're all backed up again. Sweet. So that's the demo. I've also got a question slide. I'm going to preface this with, I struggle with imposter syndrome quite a bit. So every time I put a question slide in, I want to make sure there's something funny in there. So this particular, I've included a comic about imposter syndrome. Yeah, if you've got any questions.